have each of you guys, we'll just go down the line, introduce yourselves, kind of where you're from, what company you're from, what does your company do, and what do you do specifically for that organization? We'll just start with you, Furey.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Furey DiDomenico. I'm Principal Security Architect with GuidePoint Security. GuidePoint Security is an elite team of highly experienced risk and cybersecurity professionals providing solutions for all of our clients to address risk in their organizations. I am one of the leads of our vulnerability management practice, and we are based out of Reston, Virginia. Myself, I'm based out of Florida. And thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good, Neel.
Hey, my name's Neel Sata. I'm with a company called ImagineX Digital. I'm one of the co-founders of the company and run our cybersecurity business. We've been in business for about 10 years, and there's really 4 areas that we do work in: software engineering, data, AI, and then, of course, cybersecurity. From a cyber perspective, we do work with, we do cyber advisory work. We do a lot of work around continuous threat and exposure management, identity and access management, and then DevSecOps, where we have practices around cloud security and app security. And our objective as a company is to help our clients optimize their cybersecurity investments to reduce risk most optimally. And I'm glad to be here. I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Shaieb. I'm the Chief Architect and Global Delivery Manager of Exposure Management at IBM. And I'm from Houston, yeah!
Hi, everyone. I'm Nate Schock. I'm the Global Director for Security Operations for Kudelski Security. We're a consulting company that does not just MDR support, but also advisory services around cybersecurity, risk management, exposure management, cloud security. A big part of our goal as a company is not just identify the exposures and the risks, but also to educate our clients to help change their culture to be more risk aware and more risk averse. So we do a lot of the education and changing hearts and minds.
Cool. So hi, I'm Lance Seelbach. I work with DXC Technology. For those who may not be familiar with the company as a name, it was formed in 2017 as a merger between Computer Sciences Corporation and EDS, which was acquired by HPE, or HPES, and became DXC. And the blending of that, we are one of the largest, I'd say one of the 4 largest global systems integrator in the world. We do full stack IT, engineering services, consulting. We have a big footprint in the insurance space. And I personally am responsible for our cybersecurity division throughout the entire Americas, North, Central, and South. That being said, my official titles kind of get a little bit wordy because I also own pushing into AI and automation across our global practice. As of right now, there is a whole lot of shall we say, fluff floating around in that space. And a lot of what I'm leaning into is what is actually real and how can we use it to transform not just the way that we do cybersecurity, but where does that intersect with and how we embed it throughout IT.
Wow, great group we have today. Thanks for my team who helped put this together. It's awesome. So first question for you, Furey, and we'll go down. I'm going to ask different people different stuff on this for follow-up. But here we are at ROCon. So the question is like, what does risk operations mean to you? And then why is it becoming such a critical focus in your customer organizations today?
Risk operations to us is truly just an enrichment of your business operations, your business data, your business logic, and applied to your CTEM models to more effectively drive resources for particularly the mobilization component of CTEM. Why that is particularly important today is we see a lot of our customers struggling with their current methodologies for assessing risk and qualifying response. Extending the GRC capabilities, cyber risks, as well as business cyber insurance, and qualifying a dollar amount to those mobilization efforts is what our customers are continually struggling with. And we have, as the environments and the landscape continues to change and grow, they're struggling to scale with that to qualify what resources should be applied and continued investment strategies across multiple platforms, multiple lines of business. And fundamentally, we are trying to align those activities to where we're effectively supporting lines of business. And I see us more moving into a business continuity state, to where we're really focusing on what the operations of a business look like after it experiences a loss of a line of business or even a critical existence issue.
Is that an area of growth for GuidePoint?
Absolutely. As we have been expanding and deploying CNAP, we're extending principles from C10 from CNAP into the lines of business as well for how you're building your business case and your requirements, not just for, say, solutioning, but understanding what your data strategy is, aligning all the disparate, fragmented vulnerability data that's coming into your environment through all of your tools, determining which ones are the most relevant to your business, and then rationalizing that response, and at the same time qualifying additional investments so it's not necessarily a reaction and a response. It gives you an opportunity to look forward to what sort of financial investments would bring the most bang for the buck. And we're trying to remove ambiguity from a traditional CVE or even just an asset risk score. We're enriching it even further to align with your business.
That makes sense. Lance, what do you think?
So what strikes me when we talk about risk operations as distinctively separate from security operations, really I see it through two lenses. One is, up to this point in time, a lot of what we've done is we've been focused on what already happened. You know, we have a reaction to things that happen in our environment, to the pivot and move, the creative way threat actors, whether they're outside or inside our organization, are acting. Risk operations is more forward-looking. It's more predictive in its nature. Secondly, I also see when we think of risk operations that it's a natural evolution of where we have been going as cybersecurity professionals. I mean, when I think back over my experience working in IT and security for a long time, we started out as the people who always said no. And then we evolved into the people who would say, okay, yes, but you need to do it this way. And then the next evolution that I think I saw was we finally started to learn as security professionals how to speak the language of technology, of the full IT stack, the application stack. That earned us a seat at the table. It gave us credibility in that space. Risk operations, and what I think goes with it, is finally giving us that next step of evolution where we're beginning to speak, as a whole, the language of business. Business risk. The practice of enterprise risk management has been around for a really long time and is often in the realm of CFOs, CROs, some of those C-levels you may or may not normally interact with, but that's actually where the direction of the business is going. And if we're going to actively participate in the direction of the business, protect the business, enable the business to even drive better top-line revenue, contain costs, we have to be able to speak the language. And I think taking a risk-centric approach, risk operations, that's the channel. It's the tool that's going to allow us to get there.
Yeah, it's a good lead-in. Johnny, so how does a ROC lead to go from doing vulnerability management to exposure management for an organization?
So, not to sound cliche, but it's really about understanding the battlefield. And the battlefield is really a digital symphony of zeros and ones harmoniously communicating across people, process, devices, IT, OT, trains, planes, automobiles. It gets exhausting. And where clients traditionally start out is your traditional vulnerability management, CVEs, right? And then in order to get to the ROC of being able to have all the bells and whistles, being able to have ETM, being able to do the most expensive thing in vulnerability management, which has always been normalizing the data and enriching it with their multiple data sources. That's really how you get there. So I think like what these fine gentlemen and myself, we spend a lot of time in actually studying the data. So in Qualys, it's kind of a beautiful platform because you have QQL and there's so many different ways to skin the cat of figuring out, well, what is my battlefield? Oh, I have a lot of web apps. So now you're moving the client from the next maturity of traditional vulnerability to web application. And then probably a lot of you in here know about the famous QID 91074 that helps you determine when assets were built. Oh, now somebody just dumped a whole bunch of assets on my network with really old CVEs. So now you move them a step forward into policy compliance. And then it's like, Johnny, what's the next thing we do? And then we bring in ETM and attack exposure management and all those things. So it's a journey from vulnerability management to exposure management, understanding the risk. I want to say one thing, too. I don't know if everybody in the room realizes this, but Qualys is pretty much the same age as CVE. They've been there from the very start. So you went from a time where severity was just a category, and then it was adopted by CVSS, right? And then we moved from a venerated severity score, which is very qualitative, to risk-based intelligence, being able to go to all these repositories, hacktivist groups, and being able to reduce that expense. And now we've been able to transform traditional vulnerability data from a building structure into a risk appetite pyramid, flushing the urgency up and pushing all the noise down, because 67% of CVEs are not weaponized. So why don't we concentrate on having clients fix the most important things first?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's coming full circle. You're going, well, for me, full circle. But you go from IT service management, which started, right, when we first started, I have computers and distributed networks and all that stuff. And then everybody did ITIL, and you started talking about critical assets. And then we split. We did security over here, and we did operations, IT, service management over here. But now it seems like it's coming back together a little bit to got to correlate the CMDB and start looking at those assets and how you track it back and eliminate the risk, and then tie that risk to dollars. But
and kind of the evolution was tool, then platform, where you had siloed things of traditional VM and web application and policy compliance. And now you have this fully integrated platform where you have predictive analytics to connect the dots to do what? Attack exposure management.
yeah.
Kind of powerful.
Nathan, kind of similar question, or same question, basically. How is a ROC going? And I think you even worked here a long time ago. So to go from the olden days of vulnerability management as we go through a ROC, and how does that stem into exposure management?
So I want to expand a little on what Lance and Johnny said.
Yeah.
In that,
Please.
15 years ago, back when the CISO was kind of adjacent to the C-suite, they didn't really sit at the table, they sat under the CTO. A lot of what we did was providing information on what the state of the company's risk was, right? But we didn't call it risk. We called it our vulnerability, we called it our cybersecurity. What ROC really does, or risk operations in general, it allows us to take this incredibly detailed technical concept of cybersecurity and put it into an understanding that can be brought to the table, that the C-suites understand what is risk, what is our appetite for risk, and how do we stay within that appetite. The risk operations takes these things like severity and threat intelligence or exposure and puts them into a single pane of glass so that we can say all of this equates to a low level of risk. And that's a much better message that shows what we're doing than something like we have 10,000 critical vulnerabilities, or we're 82% compliant with our SLAs. Or how does that help you determine if your SLAs are valid or if you're actually reducing the risk to your company? It doesn't. But what ROC is doing is it's helping us weaponize our data, making it useful to the C-suites that have to approve funding or have to tell their people that they have to take on extra work to secure something. So instead of being, the masters of no, or what it turned into, 8 or 9 years ago, where we were just dumping work on people's laps, now we're enabling them, right? Now we're giving them understanding so that they can get the funding, or they can push for the staff, or that they can push for the tooling that they need to close these risks and keep us within a certain score or keep us within a certain range. So really simply, what risk operations is it's not just quantifying our data, but it's making it understandable to what is a very intelligent group of people with very limited cybersecurity knowledge.
I just need that for my inbox. Like, tell me which email is the most valuable. Neel, what are your thoughts on that?
So my mental model for kind of the pivot from VM to CTEM is threefold. One, there's understanding what's in your environment, right? Yep. And so there's understanding actually what assets you have in the environment, the value of those assets, right? And being able to quantify that risk. And what's interesting about ETM is now being able to put dollar values to it. And so I think one of the challenges will be, how do you quantify not only what is the most critical thing, but then how do I assign a dollar amount so that that translates to that board conversation? So that's kind of step one, I think, is really understanding what you're trying to protect. If you don't know what you're protecting, how are you going to protect your company? And so that's step one. Step two is there's such a disparate set of tools. I bet you if I went around the room, there's 30 to 40 tools that every one of our clients is using. And how do you make sense of all that data? And so that to me is really another kind of key thing in the evolution is getting a handle on your data, right? Right now, like we've done so much work around dashboarding over the 10 years we've been in business, and it's long projects, like expensive projects for clients to just get the data, get it exposed, and be able to report on it. And so, that the middle part of my mental model is really around, like Johnny was saying, getting a handle on the data and making sense of the data and normalizing it. And then the third element of it is really, who needs to know what, right? So there's operational leaders that need to know. You have folks that are doing remediation. Are they doing their job right? The board, of course, needs to know what's going on. And so right now, the conversations I have with a lot of CISOs is around vulnerability burn down. I've remediated 4 million vulnerabilities, and the eyes glaze over when we get the reaction from board members. And so I think that the final theme around all of it, that's the bottom layer in my mental model, is it's not a technical conversation. It's much more of a business conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also a cultural thing as well. Like it's a vernacular thing that companies need to start to change the way they speak about cybersecurity.
Yeah, so Furey, how can your organization help? I mean, it's a lot to take on. So how can your organization, or how can a partner organization help a customer get a ROC?
Certainly, there's a couple of different ways that we could assist. From the technical aspect, we are an integrator. Not just an integrator of technology, but an integrator of processes and designers of right-sized programs for organizational risk. What we have seen through our practice over a number of years, and you've heard this in the industry, is the democratization of security across the organization, and we've been championing that. What we're moving to now is the democratization of risk across the organization, and that means that we also are responsible for accepting that and accepting our part, and we need to choose to support that. And that also means that we have to understand the vernacular and come to the table and speak the language of business to be able to translate that dollar investment. Typically, you'll have a patch and pray based upon CVEs or perceived business risk. A lot of times when we look at SLAs, it's a bit of a kludgy number. It's not necessarily truth to operations, but perceived risk will drive that. We're trying to also qualify that because the people that are running the business can look and go, oh yeah, there's that. How can I discover and bake that into my assessment? We can assist with that by performing analysis, say, with cybersecurity insurance as a start to understand dollar values for coverage. You can look at publicly facing data around the company, your own company, to understand earnings and the lines of business and where that value is, and then continue to drive that exposure based upon that dollar value and extend it into your assessment program. We can assist in all aspects of that. Principally, we end up performing a fair amount of integrations from any of the assessment tools to data hygiene of that. Fundamentally, I think we all agree that data strategy is a huge component to this with the disparate tools and normalization and deduplication. We assist with all aspects of that. Additionally, we sit with your GRC and your risk teams, and then we translate into the technical teams that don't necessarily have the time or the ability and resources to perform those internally. We can be that trusted partner to assist with not just the technical piece, but programmatically and presenting the value of that data to leadership.
Yeah, makes sense. We need to bridge that gap to the GRC teams as well.
We got to be able to dish it out and take it.
Yeah, good point. Nathan, kind of same thought. Like, what are the challenges, and then what does your partner organization do to help them operationalize?
So I really think that kind of summed up the answer to that. What I will say is where partnership can help is that education, that changing the way we think about things, right? So we are talking about a massive pile of data that doesn't make sense to sometimes the cybersecurity individuals until we really dig down into it. How do we normalize all that so that we can paint a picture for the executives in charge of greenlighting these projects, right? Or giving them an idea of how much it's going to cost versus, like what Neel was saying, how much risk are we actually solving with this effort? And so when you work with a partner, we have that expertise where we've done this over and over again. We've taken that time to normalize this data in a way that educates and makes it accessible to not just the executive levels, but also the business leaders, and helping the boots on the ground quantify what they're doing so that they can show what risk they're closing and why the work they're asking people to do has value. At the end of the day, cybersecurity really needs to transform, right? We can't be a group that is telling people what to do. We have to act as a go-between, especially from a risk perspective, where not only are we addressing the risks that are inherent in the business that we're identifying, but also the business risks that taking care of these vulnerabilities in an expedient fashion can open up, right? Yeah. And we need to be able to paint that picture so that the executives can make a choice and that the business leaders can trust that we're not just looking out for ourselves, but we're also taking into context what is the risk to the business, both from a cyber perspective and an operational perspective.
So true. Like, anything that's hard, if you do it once, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to go, okay, that was tough. Yeah. Anytime you try to build something, you're going to build it from scratch, and you're going to learn. You're like, oh, I wish I could just do this again. But if you're doing that from a partner perspective, you've done thousands of these where you're doing these transitions, you're going to get really, really good at it, and you're going to hit your head on a few things along the way.
Yeah. There's also the distinct fact that sometimes from an internal perspective, I know everybody up on this board has worked as a single company as opposed to a partner at some point.
Yeah.
It can be really difficult to convince from inside. And sometimes bringing in a partner just to push that narrative and back up what you're saying, he's got the right of it, this is the direction we need to go, it can be a powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Same question, Lance.
So when I think in terms of working with a partner, we would be a partner. And based on a lot of conversations I've had literally around the globe with folk who have chosen to work with DXC, the two things that come immediately to mind is that working with a partner can be an accelerator. It can take the initiatives and projects that you have, and it can bring it in much more quickly, so it gives you speed to value. And especially in a world where, and I think we've seen some of the statistics up on the on the screen over the last day or two, of we're now at the point where things are being exploited before the vulnerabilities even published. I think it becomes even more critical to lean into opportunities to accelerate moving to the view, the platforms, and the tool sets to get us there. The second thing that I often hear, and at least this is the way I describe it, it reminds me of this recent commercial from a certain insurance company of, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. And when you're working with a partner, regardless of the size, we have experiences across a broad variety of environments, technologies, capabilities. And many times when you're coming in and fundamentally transforming how you're functioning as a security department, an IT department, or even as a business, there's incredible value in having somebody by your side who has seen some of the things that you don't even realize you're going to bump into so that they can help you get past it, to be able to bring some, hey, I've seen this before, here, let me bring you the solution, and you're less relying on, okay, how fast can ChatGPT give me the answer? And then I'm worried about it hallucinating, and then I blow up the environment. So those are two of the areas that I think partners can bring a lot of value as you're on your ROC journey.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, Mr. Neel.
I agree with everything everyone said. I think a lot of folks focus on the technology side of it and the data side of it, which is super valid. I also think part of the challenge is also around the people and the process as well, right? I mean, it's a transformational paradigm shift kind of mindset that's going on within cybersecurity. So from a people perspective, you have teams that are vulnerability focused, that have CVEs, that have and even down to the engineers, changing that mindset and reskilling those folks to start thinking more with a business lens as they're doing the day-to-day work. So I think there's a people component to this as you're working with your teams to pivot to this model. What skills, what training, what needs to be done from a people perspective. And then I think from a process perspective, it's a different operating model. Today, it's very siloed, right? I'm the guy that's responsible for network remediation. So that's what I do. I don't need to worry about what's happening upstream with my cyber team that's finding all this. So it's becoming much more of almost like like what Agile was to waterfall.
Yeah.
It's now becoming that a little bit, if that's a valid analogy, because people have to break those silos down to get faster pace from detect to remediate.
Yeah, makes sense. So Johnny, as we are making this transition, there's all kinds of new technologies as well. So how are you forced to adopt new technologies? And when I mean new technologies, I'm also thinking like AI. How are you guys forced to adopt new technologies in that transition?
Since there's not a lot of time left,
Yeah.
I wanted to point out something that's really interesting. So Neel was talking a lot about culture. Well, how do you change culture? In order to have governance, you need to have accountability. In order to have accountability, you need a way to assign a task or risk to somebody through a ticket. So now you have a platform that allows you to create like a poor man's database inside of Qualys and go and enrich a ServiceNow or other platforms. And that's how you create change. Another thing that I was thinking about too, ROC could also stand for something else, Remediation Orchestration Center. Wouldn't it be cool, and this is what Qualys has essentially done, but wouldn't it be cool if you could have a platform that manages the life cycle of a vulnerability from its initial identification, the risk, and then being able to create a ticket, which is your KPI, mean time to response. And then upon approval of that change record, Qualys goes in and fixes. And then that's your second layer of fidelity, that mean time to remediate. So now you have the ability of all these technologies being able to be ingested for the very expensive stuff in normalization. So now you have a platform that identifies the battlefield and allows you to manage the life cycle of vulnerability from its initial identification to its final remediation. And that's how probably all of us do it, probably differently, but that's how we get it done.
For sure, that's where we start to merge back together with service management, and we get back to that full life cycle. That's probably the hardest part, is you get the opportunity to know what it takes to remediate or do a patch, but then that's somebody else is responsible for that, right? That goes to that team. That team has to do the move, add, change reviews. Like, what if we change this? Is it going to impact something else? If we could get that flowing, we'd be in a good spot.
That's really the power of the Qualys platform, though, and it's one of the reasons why I base our program over it, is because exactly as Johnny said, having that flow from start to finish is a powerful tool. And typically, we look at our security tools as security tools, and we're very jealous and protective of them, right? But one of the things you can do in Qualys, especially with role-based access via tags, right, is we can give our infrastructure teams the power to remediate directly from a dashboard that's informing them of risk. And then the board or the executives or the business leaders have the access to see the results of that on the risk score near instantaneously within a 4-hour window once you get validation.
Totally.
So you're giving them different views into the data that allows an incredible amount of power, and all the different pieces of this remediation lifecycle are on one tool, but nobody has access to more than they need.
Yeah. Next year, we're going to have to include insurance people on this panel because as we build this out, we're going to be able to influence insurance. Insurance prices are going to plummet.
Exclusion management.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Please.
So, Neel, we were talking about it a little bit yesterday. So in that same question of
Yeah.
like what tools, like how's AI, and what are you guys doing around AI as
Yeah.
far as,
So there's two tracks, right? There's the productivity and optimization track, right? So everyone's got Tony Starks on their team, and everyone's trying to assemble their own Iron Man suit of agents, right? You guys have your agents.
Yeah.
We're building some of our own agents to optimize our team. And I think what's interesting is now what set of agents are required to get what tasks done is where the dialogue is going for us from an AI perspective. So if you're building software, you need an architect, you need a developer, you need a tester. If you're a cyber person, you need an analyst, you need someone who's technical to do the remediation. And how do these different agents orchestrate one another to get that task done? The other lens that I think is important, if I have 30 more seconds, is the other branch of this for us from an AI perspective is there's the tension between innovation that a lot of IT teams have using AI to build software and such, and the tension that the cyber teams have around this new attack surface. And where's that line of like letting the kids play, but also protecting the house? And obviously it's based on the risk tolerance of each of your clients. And so a lot of dialogue that we're having right now is also around, what's the right way to govern AI as companies are chomping at the bit to use it. And so, there's some work around that we're doing as well to really make sure you're doing it in a responsible way, because otherwise it could get out of hand and you have shadow AI, just like we had
Rogue AI.
Yeah, rogue AI. Yeah. So, I think those are the two ways we think about it.
yeah, could be a great tool. Also, you got to learn how to use the tool. So sometimes when you get a tool, you don't know exactly like how am I going to implement that tool and how am I going to make sure, is it saving me time or is it creating me more time suck?
I think with a lot of our customers as a partner, what we focus on as well when we have a good understanding of the lines of business as a partner, we provide a consistency to the mission for your business. And what we're designing with AI is to help our clients provide that consistency. Your headcount is going to cycle as people's professional careers progress. And a lot of times when we're doing programmatic assessments, I do interviews across all lines of business and look for gaps in the mission and what we're trying to accomplish. So it removes some ambiguity around that. I think that risk also empowers culturally for change, because money and a dollar amount attached to a remediation ops is a different conversation you're having around that as opposed to technical, and that also scales to IT leadership. So already it's going to assist us democratizing security through roles, responsibilities, removing ownership ambiguity by virtue of assigning a dollar amount to it, having IT be responsible for the hygiene and the continued lifecycle management of those devices. At the same time, that agentic AI can assist you to continue to keep a consistent baseline there while your talent is now developing the new processes as the business continues to grow and develop.
Yeah, in a way you could use it to do all the stuff you wish you could have done before. So it's not necessarily replacing someone, it's just making you more efficient. Guys, I can't thank you enough. Our time flew by. We'll take recommendations for questions next year, but thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
A huge thank you to our partners for that insightful discussion.